Welcome, guys. Welcome, everyone. Very glad to be here and talk about one of my favorite topics, climate tech, and actually the more important part of it, how to scale it. And if the previous panel discussion was more about the investor side of how to invest in companies that are scaling climate solutions, now we'll have two company founders who will share their lessons learned, their challenges, their perspectives on how to actually scale solutions to the level where they actually bring the impact, the positive impact that we need. So this was like a short introduction to the topic, and now maybe you could tell more about what you're actually building. Jacob?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jacob. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Epoc Biodesign. We're a synthetic biology company based in London. And we work with nature's natural machines, enzymes, which are these highly complex and powerful biomolecules that enable lots of chemical reactions to happen. And we program these enzymes to do a variety of different things. But for us, our focus is really on programming them to break down plastic waste. So we can design these enzymes to break down plastic waste. We add them to the plastic. They break it down into chemicals. And then we can sell those chemicals to a variety of different industries, everything from new polymer manufacturing to paints and coatings, fertilizers. And really what this enables us to do is to create value from our waste, things would otherwise go to landfill or incineration, and provide a lower carbon route and more profitable route to producing the chemicals that we need to make the products that we know and love. We're about 22 people, just signed employees number 23 and 24 this week, which is great.
Congrats.
Thank you. And we've raised about $15 million of venture capital, most recently an $11 million seed round that we closed at the beginning of 2022, which was led by Chris Sacker's Lower Carbon Capital. And that's pretty much us.
Thank you for sharing. So just for people in the back, you use the biology and turn enzymes, the plastic, into other solutions, right? Can you rephrase that once again so everyone really gets like the essence of the business?
Absolutely. So we use enzymes to break down the plastic waste and turn them into chemicals. So essentially, this is a different route to producing all of the chemicals that we need to make the world go around. We essentially just make them from waste instead of from newly extracted dead dinosaurs underground.
Okay, I got the aha moment. Thank you so much for this. All right, Christopher, could you share more about what your business is up to?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. So I'm Christopher. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sunhero. We are in the residential electrification space in Southern Europe. So fundamentally, we all know that we need to electrify our daily lives. We have consumers all around the world who are using a lot of electricity, more and more electricity. As the planet is heating, as we're luckily heating and cooling more with electricity, moving more and more mobility to electricity, but a lot of that electricity is still not being produced in a clean and sustainable fashion. And ultimately, we're helping our customers, who are all residential customers, move to an electrified home, installing solar panels, installing EV chargers and storage. And we do that in Southern Europe because fundamentally, we believe that we need to bring the solutions to the parts of the world where the problem is the biggest. And we see that especially in Southern Europe, we have incredibly low penetration of renewable energies in the domestic space. So we're active in Spain, and at the end of the day, trying to use software and process and a different way of thinking about the customer to bring that to the masses.
Super interesting. There are more and more solar panel solutions popping up even in Latvia, even more in Estonia, which is somehow they're ahead of us once again. So I'm looking forward to your company expanding also to the Baltics. Yeah, maybe while we are on the subject, could you maybe explain how do you approach the business design in your business? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I think fundamentally with renewable energies, it's a paradox because on the one hand, and I think Heidi was just talking about that in the last panel, you had this revolution on the production side, and you have fundamentally solar panels that are getting a little bit better every year. You have battery storage that's getting cheaper every year, but the kind of the breakthrough technology is largely behind us. And still, we face most countries in even Western Europe, in Northwestern Europe, in Sweden, in Germany, in the Netherlands, have still relatively low penetration of renewable energies, especially when it comes to the residential sector and also the commercial industrial sector. And fundamentally, we believe that that is not a technological problem per se, but it's a distribution problem. And the way that we looked at this business is to say, there is, roughly 40 to 50% of the value creation is actually the hardware itself. It's the panels, it's the inverters, it's the batteries. But the other 50, and increasingly because the price of the hardware keeps going down, but the other side of it is the engineering, is the procurement, is the actual construction. And that's the piece that is actually stopping the adoption in a lot of ways, because that's the piece that is very difficult to scale. It's a little bit more difficult to scale with technology. We fundamentally believe that it is possible to scale with technology. And especially, and this is where the residential side is just completely different from the commercial industrial side, is that at the end of the day, this is a consumer product. This is individual people making decisions just like any other consumer decision that they're making. But it's a very complicated decision to make, because fundamentally, everyone is a first-time buyer. Nobody is buying their second, third PV system. Then it's, in a order of magnitude of investment that it's not a kind of, let me just give this a shot kind of investment. So you're paying, 10, 20, 30,000 euros, depending on, the battery size, the number of panels that you have, whether or not you have an EV charger. That's a pretty sizable investment for any consumer. So I think our approach has always been to say, let's try to put the consumer in the middle and not the technology in the middle. Most of the people in the space are fundamentally thinking about this as an engineering problem, as a structural, as a mechanical, as an electrical engineering problem. And we fundamentally think that this is a consumer problem. And so kind of combining the process innovation and using software to accelerate that with the consumer focus built on top of very stable hardware, very well-developed hardware, in the grand scheme of things, very stable supply chains and prices, that is kind of where our model sits. And to be honest, we designed it from the beginning with that in mind, because we looked at the market and said, we have all these moonshot technologies, we have new fusion reactions, we have a lot of things that are very, very interesting, and they have an extremely long timeline. And this technology that we're building on, at the end of the day, it's there, it's done. We just need to build it. We just need to build the process around it. So at the end of the day, our company looks much more like a operationally heavy e-commerce fulfillment company, but we are actually doing something positive for the planet.
And that makes a lot of sense, just from what is happening in market in this region, right? You would think that it would be easy to set up the solar panels. It's been around, this technology has been around for, years? But when you get around to actually do it, it's a very complex process, and I definitely see a problem to solve. All right, that's pretty amazing, huh?
If I might ask as well, I mean, the way you talk about your customer and your consumer is very reminiscent of Amazon shareholder letters. And, you mentioned as well, a lot of other companies, they focus on the technology, they focus on the engineering. I guess, what was the realization for you that actually we do need to focus on our customer? And then what do you feel is the biggest barrier for companies like yours to say, well, actually, if we make this as good of a consumer experience as possible, really kind of the rest will come?
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm one generation older, so I didn't look at Amazon as much as I looked at Microsoft. And I personally spent some time in Latin America in the 90s, and I realized that even in the mid-90s, the people I was in Ecuador, they were installing Windows, they were installing Microsoft. And the kind of the aha moment for me was, that's not a product thing, that's a distribution thing. Because back then, you didn't download things on some app store, you had to physically get the software from a floppy disk or a CD onto the computer, and that's ultimately distribution. And if you look at companies like Amazon, like Apple, like Microsoft, these fundamentally, they've all solved a product problem, but they've also all solved a distribution and operations or a supply chain problem. And so for us, when we started the company, we really actually had those companies in mind. And I think to your question about what the challenge is, it's ultimately that when I talk to people like you guys or I talk to investors and I tell them we're customer-centric, yeah, everyone's customer-centric. Yes, everyone is, but not in our business. In our business, people are not customer-centric because our competitors are small local installers whose number's in the yellow pages, and they get a call and then they answer, but the guy's on the road and he's in the van, and maybe he calls back, maybe he calls back in 3 weeks, maybe he forgets, maybe he doesn't, maybe he gets your name right, maybe he doesn't. The other
You need to fill out various kinds of forms. They all take a ridiculous amount of time.
Exactly.
It feels like they need your whole life story just so you can get a quote.
Yeah, and then the opposite side is you have the big utilities, and the big utilities. So we're primarily active in Spain. They have big utilities in Spain. They have 10 million customers. They don't care about you. They have. I mean, the utilities have two problems. It's that the customers hate them, and that they hate their customers. So, like fundamentally, like it's actually being customer centric. It sounds so simple, and like everyone is customer centric.
Yeah.
But in our business, people aren't. But convincing people of that is not that easy. And then I kind of glossed over a little bit the software side, but explaining to people like where we actually add software to this process. Because at the end of the day, yes, one of our guys has to drive to the customer and climb onto the roof and actually screw in the panels. So a lot of people who are financing these things rightfully ask, like, okay, where's the software? How do you where's the 70% SaaS margins? And I think this is something that that we work really hard on to bring that into the equation, and it's something that we use to really make the process a lot smoother for the customer, a lot more dependable, and a lot faster ultimately. Because at the end of the day, we do want to grow very quickly, and we have been growing extremely quickly since we launched. We launched about 2 years ago. We actually, I think, launched about 2 years ago today, and we're at 100 people, over 1,000 installations. And so, we're growing very quickly, but in order to do that, we need to convince people to kind of follow our mission.
Yeah, let's definitely touch up on that a bit later in the panel. Very, very interesting insights. But I want to hear from Jacob how does your company actually approach the business design, and how do you think about scaling enzymes and biology and living organisms? It's a completely different game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of our challenges is we're developing a new technology that has never existed before at the earliest stages of the business, right? We were taking on science risk, not engineering risk. So there were kind of fundamental questions like, is this technology going to work? And if it doesn't, well, here's how we can create secondary value. But there is still that fundamental question. At the beginning of our business, we were thinking that we were going to become a platform, that we were going to use all of our enabling technology to design enzymes for lots of different people, for lots of different applications. Very quickly, we realized that that was a difficult business model to make work. It wasn't very differentiated. Even if our technology was the best in the world, the kind of act of protein engineering and biological design has become pretty commoditized and democratized at this stage. And so it becomes a race to the bottom on cost. And that's something that's very difficult to compete on. And so we took a slightly different focus, and we said, okay, well, we are going to focus on becoming a fully vertically integrated synthetic biology company. We're going to design our biology, we're going to scale our biology, we're going to sell our product. And at that point, we will have achieved complete de-risking of the science and the engineering, as well as staying very close to our customers, having complete control over any level of execution risk. I mean, one of our struggles that sort of any biotech company is going to face is, you're working on deep tech hardware. It takes a long time to get to your MVP. Even then, your MVP is tiny and nowhere near cost competitive, and it's very rare that all of those things can come together. So the need really is to find very supportive investors who can help you along that journey, recognize that it is a long path until first revenues, but actually first revenues can be very meaningful in a way that maybe they're a little bit smaller in a SaaS business where you're just speaking with your first customers. I think what's interesting for us as well is, we're B2B, right? We sell chemicals. It's in many ways not a very sexy business. But actually what we're finding is that traditionally a lot of these very large corporates, these huge chemical conglomerates, the polymer manufacturers, the people that we work with, they always feel like we're moving at lightning speed, even if we feel like we're moving very slowly, because they're not really used to working with startups. And our customer is not necessarily the person buying the chemicals, but it's actually specifically the person within the organization that we speak to. And what we're always thinking about when we're working with our customers is like, okay, well, you're head of innovations at chemical company X or Y. How is working with us going to get you a promotion? How is working with us going to be meaningful to your business? Do you suddenly have a very reliable supplier where you're able to get your recycled material, whatever that might be? Have you sort of got 10% of the way in one chunk on reaching your sustainability commitments? And so, we have these multiplex challenges of difficult, unpredictable biology, a long time until our kind of first meaningfully revenue-generating asset. But then also our customers look very, very different to customers of other companies too.
And with all that, they still raised, what, 50 million, you said?
1.5, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's pretty impressive. So how do you actually go about it when all the reasons above?
Yeah, well, I think we're at a very unique moment in time. We have all of the conditions coming together into a single point that enable companies like ours to be built. So we have exponentially decreasing costs in enabling technology like gene synthesis and sequencing on the biology side. We have cheap computing power, advances in artificial intelligence, which rapidly decrease our iteration cycles and the cost of actually building a product in biology. So that's hugely exciting. I think the other point to mention as well, and ultimately this is a tech-focused conference, and maybe this is a bit of a call to action to all the founders or would-be founders in the room. This is the first time in human history that we've had an opportunity to fundamentally reinvent the way that we make everything, the way that we power everything. That's a huge opportunity. Any company that's able to grab a slice of that is going to be insanely valuable in the same echelon as the global tech giants of today. So I think, the last 10, 20 years absolutely have existed in bits, but the next 10, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, frankly, the rest of the century is going to exist in atoms. We have suddenly defensibility of software companies being brought into question, at least their tech stacks, with the rise of generative AI and, non-human coders. Well, defensibility is in atoms. You can't predict or work around a large steel reactor that's producing product. That's not something that can be replicated particularly easily. So you should all go and build climate companies, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Aside from the impact that you can have, I think it's, from a personal side, in my mind, it's really the only thing that's worth spending your time on. There's no way that you wake up and having spent, 5 years working with Jacob, and you realize, that there's no way that isn't time well spent, or building a company in that space that isn't time well spent. That is definitely worth your time. I don't know if selling more ads or selling mobile games, or I don't know if that is time that you're going to get back. And I think this is really an amazing opportunity, because you can build companies that are very far along on kind of like the technical innovation, or you can build companies what we're doing, which is maybe a little less technical and much more operationally focused, and you can there's a million things in between that you can choose that fit what you want to do, what you believe in, and it's really true that these things were not possible 10, 15 years ago, because the technology didn't exist, because the costs were prohibitive, and now is really an incredible time, an incredible opportunity to build these breakout companies.
Very on point. Couldn't agree more. I do suggest we look at the climate change with realistic and science-based view, but also understanding what an opportunity it is. So very well put, guys. But I want to come back to the investability of the business. How did you actually approach investors and made sure that they can invest in your business? Because the typical VC's ROI expectations are quick, understandably, for biotech and hardware. Maybe they're more generous, but still. How did you approach that, and how did you choose investors? How did you approach the conversation and manage expectations early on? Jacob, maybe if you have something to say on this.
Sure. I mean, look at when we were raising our first round, I won't lie, it was a bit of a struggle. As my first time founding a company, we were still trying to figure it out. Trying to figure out our story as well, and I think through that process, it really helped us to refine, well, actually, what are we building? What are the investable aspects of this? What should we be focusing on? Sometimes we got good advice, sometimes we got bad advice, but that's just part of the journey. Look, I think, though, at the earliest stages, it's ultimately about storytelling. If you can get A, B, and C correct, what can you build? And that, I think, is one of the biggest things. It's about thinking about, well, okay, our core product might have a number of years before it's a 9-figure run rate asset to the business, but on the way there, what are the opportunities for secondary value creation? How can we monetize what we're developing sooner rather than later? I think also now, even when we first started raising money, customers were not necessarily willing to say, look, we're going to take an early bet on this technology, because even when we raised our first round, kind of end of 2020, sustainability, climate change, we're not as high up on the agenda for customers as they are today. Whereas now we can go to customers and they're like, please, when can we get access to your product? When can we get access to your technology? And that gives us a really exciting opportunity to have people pay a little bit more to jump the wait list. And that's just stuff that didn't exist previously. And I think now, when speaking to investors, clear articulation of what the opportunity is, what the world looks like if we succeed. We now have a track record to show that we have a higher chance of achieving that world than maybe we did when we were raising our first round. And we've been able to show that there's, even in hardware, even in fundamental science risk in some areas of our business, there is still opportunity for secondary value creation. If we can't get this thing perfectly right, we still have a massively valuable, venture-backable business on our hands. And I think de-risking that path is really key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think our experience maybe was a little bit different, but I think there are some interesting parallels for sure. So we raised our last round, which was our Series A of 10 million. We just closed it in March of this year. And we raised the seed round of roughly 3.5 million in December of 2021. And we launched the company, as I said, pretty much 2 years ago. So we started off with a pre-seed round that we kind of scrapped together. And then I think our approach was very, very tactical. We always looked at, what can we achieve with the money that we have? What do we think we need to achieve with the money that we have? What are the things that we believe that the investors are going to look at? And of course, the world changed pretty dramatically in the last 2 years. So we didn't always get it 100% right. But I think you kind of have to put a little bit, you have to find a balance, I think, as a founder between building the company in the way that you fundamentally think it should be built. And at the end of the day, you are selling something to someone and you have to offer a product that they want to buy. I placed a huge emphasis on the storytelling aspect, very tactically. I raised the money over Zoom mainly. I never show slides because I always want the investors to see me and not me in the little corner, and they have the slides and so I shared the slides beforehand or afterwards, and I just tell the story about why I founded the company, why I believe in what we're doing, sharing, what I think the key achievements are. And ultimately, because we have a business that, is operational, we've always been fortunate enough that, we show growing numbers, we show, kind of up into the right charts. Fundamentally, you need to have something that people are looking for, and you need to understand, like, there are investors, and I hate to bring up Heidi again, but, Pale Blue Dot is an investor we spoke to, and they said right off the beginning, like, this is not for us. And then if that's the answer, then you just move on, because there are investors who, you just have to find the people that can believe in what you believe, that have also the portfolio construction to do what you think you've been, and you can think they're great to the end of the world. I thought they were great. They were incredibly friendly. I love that team. I thought they were super smart, but it was just such a clear, this is not for us. This doesn't fit the criteria. And then you just move on. And I think there's so many investors out there, and you really have to just kind of filter much more based on also understanding objectively the constraints that they have, the way that they think about the world, that they speak about the world, and then you just pick the people who are right for you. And so we were very happy in the last round to get some more consumer-focused investors and climate-focused investors. And in the first round, kind of a little bit in between investors, and so we've been very happy with that. But ultimately, you just have to acknowledge who's it for and who isn't it for, and then pick your lane and tell your story and have good answers.
Very good points made. I hope this will be useful to the founders in the room. We have some couple of minutes left, and if the technical team would be okay with it, maybe we could ask a couple of questions to the audience. So there are questions, so maybe you can just say it out loud. And oh, there is a mic already. Thank you so much. Let's use the couple of minutes we have.
I'm just wondering about the plastic compounds that you work with. Does it require the plastic to be well separated into different types, or you can basically work with all together mixed?
It's a great question. So we do work with some complex blended plastics. Really what we see is over time, we built a capability to design very good enzymes, but then look specifically at this problem of plastic waste, which has given us an opportunity to essentially design enzymes for, I would say, nearly every type of plastic waste out there. What we intend to do as a business is to, both on our own, but also in collaboration with certain partners where it makes sense, scale processes for each individual plastic. Once we have confidence that we can do that, then we have a pathway to merging these designs to basically achieve our dream, which is like, let's mine landfill for every type of plastic, let's put it into our process and make something valuable out the other end. So yes, but we see it as a stepwise approach in order to get there.
All right, thank you for the great question. There's another one, I see.
Thanks for the interesting panel. I have a question for Christopher. We also have a hardware startup, not a competitor. So if you could elaborate on your fundraising tactics a little bit, specifically, for example, given that you have your hardware startup with distribution model, it's not always what VCs like. It's not like when you have two developers coding and expecting a 1 billion valuation next year. So how do you go about that fence of VC funds in how you approach this? And do you tailor the business model to cater to VC funds in that case, or do you tailor the pitch a little bit?
So we don't tailor the model to fit the funds. We fundamentally, so we don't build our own hardware. I think that may be a pretty important distinction. We use existing hardware that is out there, and we build a distribution around it. And I think at the end of the day, and Jacob brought up Amazon before, you can, in our model, you can kind of bring up parallels from the past that investors understand. And you basically say, this is like Amazon in 2002, but in a different vertical. And that, it gives, whether or not that's a great selling argument or not, but it gives the investors like a frame of like how to think about this business. And it gives them like an opportunity to think about, okay, if I were looking at that opportunity back then, aside from the fact that obviously that would have been an incredible investment, but you figure out like, okay, what's important to build that type of company? And then I do the same thinking on my end, and I kind of anticipate what are the things that they will care about, and then I kind of tailor the answers to that. I tailor kind of the pitch to that a little bit. And then ultimately, I think, you have to realize that raising money is like selling. So, you build a process, you build a CRM, you talk to everyone. Sometimes you don't take no for an answer. Sometimes you have to realize that a no really is a no. And then you kind of iterate and learn, and you try to be very quick, and you try to manage your time extremely well. And you follow up, and you're proactive, and ideally you have the answers on the top of your head, and you don't need to like think about them, and you don't give contradicting answers. Beat and raise is also a great strategy. You start the fundraising process, and you say, we did X in revenue of last month, and then you talk to them 3 weeks later, and you say, oh, by the way, I have an update. This month we're doing X times 30%, and you just keep doing that. I think at the end of the day, it's a sales process, and you just have to manage it extremely well. I would never change fundamentally the company that I'm building, but I do think about who do I partner with and how do I tell the story to them. And then tactically, I may pull forward one project because I think it has a better impact for the fundraise rather than something else. But those are 3-4% differences that I kind of move projects around. Fundamentally, we're building the company that we believe that we should be building.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Just quickly would add on to that. I mean, your number one job as a founder is to be a salesperson. Like, you're selling to your investors in order to get the money. You're selling to your customers to actually generate revenue. You're selling to your team and to your hires to keep them motivated and to actually bring them on in the first place. You're selling to yourself because you're going to wake up some mornings and just think, why on earth am I doing this? And then you can sell to yourself and like get back into it. That is your number one job. If you can do that effectively, then that's a huge asset to have.
Yeah. So good luck with selling to yourself, to your investors, to your team, and make sure that a lot of people buy into climate tech, because that's what we need to get the solutions for climate change. Thank you both so much for being here, for sharing your insights. See you around.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.